and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Right-On Optics. Right-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rightonoptics.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by ManusX. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with ManusX. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com. It is time to talk about countering stalkers. This is a broad topic, and there's a lot of bad advice floating around out there that we're trying to fix. So we want to wade into it and try to provide some clarity and help you get control back, help someone in your circle get control back. We have to temper that a little bit because this is a podcast, right? This is maybe an hour long audio discussion about how to handle it. This isn't, professional guidance from a lawyer or from a crisis center. This is a couple of guys who've had various levels of experience and exposure to it, trying to talk you through it and give you some options.
And just to expand and reiterate on Jim's point about this being a complex thing, there's so many possibilities and variables that we just can't assess and predict in terms of how much danger you might be in from this person if this is something that you're currently experiencing. So although this might be a little bit of food for thought and might help you through it and give you some ideas moving forward, we don't want you to put too much weight into any one thing that we say in lieu of getting professional help, right? So if you have a stalker and that is something that you're actively dealing with, sure, get some ideas here, listen through it, but understand that this is for informational purposes. We're not offering legal advice, and certainly you shouldn't rely on your safety. Don't leave that to us. So take it with a grain of salt, get some ideas from it. But more importantly, this is about understanding some of the nuance in what some of the legal stuff might mean and what some of the behavioral stuff might mean. And then if you ever encounter this in the future, or if you know someone that encounters this in the future, then you can maybe help them through it in some way.
Yeah. So we need to understand some of the nuance here and understand this is a nuanced, kind of squishy thing. Unfortunately, there are a lot of different types and gradients of stalking, what people characterize colloquially as stalking versus like a legal definition. And it ranges a lot, right? From some girl looking up her ex-boyfriend on Facebook to like straight up murder and everything kind of in between. It appears also in different contexts. You have things like strangers and fans stalking a celebrity, and sometimes very, very dangerously stalking a celebrity. You have kind of the post-relationship stuff. Somebody breaks up with somebody else. The person who got broken up with doesn't take the hint and keeps pursuing even after the relationship is supposed to be over. There is post-escape from a domestic violence situation. Some sort of long-term relationship is abusive, continues to be. The abusee leaves and the abuser comes after him, right? And one of the trends that we've seen in the last couple of years is it is getting increasingly technical or cyber in nature, right? There's cyber harassment and cyber stalking, and that adds a dimension to it that I don't think we really had to deal with even 10 years ago. We didn't deal with, at least not to the level that we are now.
It's things like people can spoof phone numbers and make someone else's number, show up when they call you on their caller ID, and just a lot of things that can make tracking and proving some of this really hard. And in those scenarios that Jim presented to you, you have to understand that it could be a harmless obsession that is never going to put you in any real danger other than just be annoying and creep you out, or it can be outright homicidal, like he said. And so the risk assessment part of this, threat assessment part of this, is a big deal, and that's why every case is different and everyone is unique.
Dynamic. It can accelerate and grow from something that appears harmless to something that gets very not harmless very quickly, right? Yep. These are dynamic situations. So that gradient and a tendency toward normalcy bias. Normalcy bias means, most people want to assume that everything's fine, whether it is or not, right? And along with that, kind of the natural human response to like not want to make a big deal out of it, or reach out to an authority figure, because authority figures are scary. Those human nature tendencies sometimes slow and stunt the most appropriate responses to it. And it's easy for me to sit here and judge how people handle these very tricky situations. But at the end of the day, those are forces at play that are keeping people from getting the help they need. Yeah, right?
There's a tendency to downplay it in a lot of cases.
Oh yeah.
Especially if it's an ex or something like that, and you assume otherwise good intentions and otherwise assume safety or security on some level when things have gotten weird, and when you're in the middle of it, when you're in that fog, it can be hard to see.
Yeah. And relationships are squishy and people are squishy. Another factor that complicates these a lot is when your lives are intertwined, your lives are squished together somehow, right? You may work together or work around each other. In fact, we polled some friends on Facebook about this topic, and 2 or 3 pointed out that coworkers in their police department were stalking them. And that adds a whole other dimension, right? You may have shared custody of kids. Real life is complicated. Relationships are complicated. The human courting process, that traditionally had men acting as pursuers and women being the pursued, just makes this all worse. So understanding that it's not always as simple as, I got a restraining order, I got a gun, I'm good. There's more to it than that. So we need to understand the complicated parts in order to make it simple when we need to. So speaking of restraining orders and guns, the 2 dumbest pieces of advice that I have heard over and over and over in relation to stalking are just get a restraining order and just get a gun. There's no just about those things, right? Restraining orders are important, and we're going to explain that, but they're not simple, and they're sure as hell not a cure-all, right? They are one layer. Telling a victim to get a gun does nothing. First off, very few actually will get a gun. Even fewer will get training. So you have an untrained person with a gun. That's usually not a good thing. And even fewer than that will actually carry that gun when it matters. So just telling a friend, oh, the guy creeped you out? Well, you should get a shotgun. That's not getting her anywhere. Okay? And you need to understand that and have the maturity and the professionalism to understand that advice isn't getting us anywhere. So those are what I would describe as good idea fairies. They're floating around all through the internet ether and all through the things a brother tells his sister ether, and they're not getting us anywhere. They're a product of tactical fantasy. And they're a product of our human nature to desire that we have to just check a box and say, oh, I'm good. I have a gun, I'm good, right? One layer doesn't make you good. A restraining order doesn't protect you. It's one layer. A gun doesn't protect you, even if you know how to use it. It's one layer. Cybersecurity doesn't protect you, but it's one layer. You need to stack those layers to regain some safety and some control. And that's what we're looking for here. So let's talk about the restraining order and what it can and can't do for you, right? We need to fight the attitude that it is just a piece of paper. Yes, it kind of is, but there's more to it than that. We also have to fight the attitude that getting a restraining order might be provocative to the perp itself. If you give him that much control, you're not taking control back for yourself.
And that's part of the issue with stalking in general, is it's often a power and control thing. Like a lot of domestic violence type of scenarios, There's a lot of power and control struggle. And victims of things like this often don't want to get the restraining order because they don't want to push the big red button, and offend them or hurt his feelings because they're hoping it's just going to go away. And one of the things that we're going to talk about as we go further here is you need to be more assertive than that. And part of investing in your own survival is being assertive about what those boundaries are and what you're going to do about them if they're encroached upon, right? So, yeah, it is just a piece of paper. And yeah, it could piss somebody off. I'm not saying that that's outside of the realm of possibilities, but it could be a deterrent, right? It could send a clear message and say, hey, you're on notice that we're actually paying attention to this. And if it goes further, there are future steps. So it can be a deterrent for some people. I wouldn't count on that. Again, don't bet your safety on it, but it's a step in that direction. It's escalation on your part to get distance from this person. It lowers the burden of proof. So if you have a restraining order against a person and there is some incident, I don't have to prove what they did or what they said, just that they were there and they violated the order. And that can make things a whole lot simpler for holding someone accountable. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't also want to show what happened, right? If I can, but it does make it easier to solve the problem, if that makes sense. Like I can make an arrest at a much lower threshold if that is in place. The other thing about that threshold is having the order can often enhance the charges and the sentencing that are involved, the consequences for whatever they do in the future. For example, and this is going to vary obviously from place to place, but in Arizona, for example, if someone assaults someone who has a restraining order against them, it makes that an aggravated assault. It goes from misdemeanor to felony all of a sudden, right? So it can affect things like that. And importantly, it starts to establish that boundary, right? It documents a boundary. It clearly establishes that you are not allowed to have this kind of contact with this person under these circumstances, et cetera. And it also lets you document the patterns that you're trying to avoid, right? I want a restraining order against this person because of these troublesome behaviors. Here's a list of police report numbers that these things have been documented under. And this is why I want this person to not be allowed, at my workplace, at my home, at whatever. And now in the future, when those things continue to occur, you can be like, look, this is why I took these steps. This isn't an impulsive thing that just happened today. This is a pattern of behavior, and you're kind of laying some groundwork for that in the future. And laying that groundwork and having that foundation is going to make it a lot easier for you to escalate, like I said a minute ago, right? Not only legally, there's legal consequences, you can hold them accountable, but also tactically. It will help your argument, right? When you use force to defend yourself, whether that's deadly force or some other less lethal means of force, whatever that means, you can say, yeah, I did these things and here's why. And this is a restraining order that was served, 3 months ago or however many weeks ago, and then he showed up at my house and these things happened, and so these are the steps that I took to protect myself, right? Because he showed up here in violation of that. So it's another tool that helps set that stage, if that makes sense. That.
Yeah. So let's deep dive restraining orders, right? We've talked about why it's important. And this is tricky. Talking about it in general is tricky because every jurisdiction is a little different in how they handle these orders. So what is true in Phoenix may not be true in Los Angeles, may not be true in New York City, right? And certainly in Toronto or London. This also isn't legal advice, right? I'm not a lawyer. Mike's not a lawyer. We are tacticians. We're trying to help you set the tactical stage, right? But we went and talked to some lawyers about this, and we want to relay a few key lessons. A lot of what I'm about to tell you, I stole from a guy named Mordecai, who teaches a great self-defense in the law class. And I interviewed him actually on this topic, and he was like, Jim, let me tell you a few things. And I'm like, I am ready, Mordecai. Send it. So a couple things from him. He said, don't run to the courthouse. Like, stop, smoke one. This requires some introspection and cold calculation. You can't just flail and expect to grab a legal lifeline. The legal system doesn't work that way. You got to figure out what you're trying to do. Take some control back, but you got to start with yourself. Controlling yourself in this process is really important. Being reactive is a bad way to do that, especially when the situation is gray and complicated, right? Understand that you are entering a legal battle, and you do not want to be in a fair fight. You want overmatch, just like any other battle. Understand that when you go for legal action, the legal universe is a broadsword, not a scalpel. The process itself is going to be painful, and you're going to get cut. And there may be collateral damage. Civil, criminal, just practical, having to show up to the courthouse is going to take time out of your day. And the other guy, the other side of this, the perpetrator, the stalker, is probably going to lawyer up too and may counterattack legally. And you got to be prepared for that. So if you're going to get a restraining order, you should be seeking it strategically, right? Use it to paralyze him. Use it to pull his resources away from him. Use it to shape future interactions. But you have to be strategic about even getting the order itself. Start by figuring out what it is you're trying to accomplish. What does success look like? Are you just trying to be left alone? That's usually the threshold. I just want to not hear from him again. Great. Know that. Are you trying to survive an imminent threat? This probably doesn't get that for you, but it's a start. Don't expect this to change his personality. Restraining orders don't make assholes not be assholes.
True story.
Do expect it to help you set up the future battlefield. That's what you're shooting for anyway, right? And you got to consider time in this. How much time is elapsing between your interaction with the stalker, the threats, versus going in and actually trying to get legal action? Have you done anything in that time that he can bring up? Knowing that, start tapering or cutting your interaction. What you say and do can be brought up against you. Your text messages are fair game. Your posts on Facebook are fair game. Be careful what you say and don't leave doubt. Do keep your own conduct above reproach because it's going to be brought up. Don't put him in a position, or her, where he can challenge, like, this is an active relationship and it's kind of messy and she's just using this to gain an advantage. If there should be an order at all, it should be on both of us. Because if you give any weight to that charge, you get the restraining order too. And that's actually kind of a common danger here, is the judge might just slather on restraining orders to everybody. And that's a little literary foreshadowing. So,
And you get an order, and you get an order.
You get an order. Restraining orders for all my friends. So you're trying to shape the battlefield even when you start this process, right? And you have to be deliberate with what you do and what you say. In a family law setting, which is what you're going into, understand that you are one of X thousand bickering people who can't communicate and can't solve their own problems in front of the judge that week. To you, this is a giant life event. It's a life-turning crisis. To everyone else in the courtroom, it's Tuesday. You are a number. You probably need help communicating the problem by way of an affidavit. An affidavit is your written side of the story. It needs to be written to meet the legal criteria for the judge to be able to act on it. What are the characteristics of stalking, and how are you explaining that this stalker meets those characteristics? Where this is going is you probably need a lawyer. And if you can't afford one, find legal aid, find a domestic violence hotline, and see what resources they can bring to bear. But you're probably going to need some help with this.
And that's, I want to make sure that we're careful here, because if we're talking family law stuff where there's a lot of messy custody stuff, that might be true. But getting a restraining order for your safety generally is not that complicated. You can walk down and fill out a form. The affidavit will help you through it, and that will get the process rolling to set a hearing. And if that person wants to come in and fight it, that's when you need to be ready for this battle that Jim is talking about. But the initial steps of this guy is a problem and I need to get a restraining order because this needs to stop, you could go down and do that today if you needed to. And it's not that complicated in most areas. Again, it's going to vary place to place. I acknowledge that. But I can tell you that common experience in at least a couple places is those initial steps are not that difficult. So I don't want you to get too freaked out that this is a big, huge, complex thing. It can be. It can get there, but look into it for your area before you freak out too much.
Yeah, I don't want to freak you out, but I do want you to understand that it can get very complicated, especially if he lawyers up and counterattacks, which he can do.
Yeah.
You never know. His mom might roll in with a big checkbook and help him get a lawyer. That has happened. And you're trying to control the outcome here. And when you're trying to control the outcome, you're trying to set yourself up in gross overmatch, right? And that's why I want you to try to get some help. Can you go in and fill out the form on your own? Yes, you can. But that puts you back into being one of X thousand bickering people. And so this is a tricky thing, right? It's nuanced. Can you fill out the form? Yes. And if you have to, you have to. But when you can lawyer up, do that, right? So how do you lawyer up? I have personally had to find lawyers in the past, and I have had a really hard time finding them. Like, yeah, they're in the yellow pages. Yeah, you can Google them, but which one do you pick? The guy with the, AAA law firm or the AAAA law firm or whatever, like, because that's how they list them in the phone book. I don't know. So how do you lawyer up? Well, a domestic violence advocate hotline, whatever your local one is, can probably refer you. Talk to people who have recently had family law experiences and find out who helped and who didn't. And note that you're specifically looking for family law specialists. Like, this is their jam, is this kind of thing. And understand that thing I said about bickering people. If you don't make your case well, if you don't fill out that form well, the judge may well pass out restraining orders to everybody, including you, right? And that's not the end of the world. You might get a restraining order put on you. That's fine, but know that that comes with a lot of restrictions, including things like your ability to arm yourself. So this is one of the things you're trying to control in terms of the outcome. When you explain yourself, and that's usually in the affidavit, it might be when you talk to the judge, you need to be able to explain the history. You don't have to put the entire 5,000-page history of your relationship on one affidavit form, but you should be able to explain it succinctly. And that's where the value of keeping like a running log of your interactions, like start writing stuff down, will come in, and saving electronic communications, emails, texts, get some screen grabs. You need to be clear about the problem. What exactly is it that is making this stalking and not just a pain in your butt, right? If you want to be taken seriously, you have to do all that work up front in the affidavit telling your story. Give a clear chronological history and be clear about the issue. Again, what makes this guy not just an a-hole, but like a serious a-hole, a criminal a-hole, right? You're trying to hand this to the judge on a platter. You're trying to give him a porterhouse, not a guinea pig. And like put a bow on it, right? At the hearing, it's all about being calm and clear. Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. Answer the judge. When you get asked a question, answer the question the judge asked you, not the question you wish you were asked. Stop, think, answer. Understand that you can lose the judge, and this is a people game. If you win, it's because the judge wanted you to win. Let the other guy screw it up. Let the other guy get emotional. Expect the judge to ask you what you've done to contribute to the situation. Again, understand that a couple thousand people a week roll through these courthouses, and most of them are just really low on life skills. So you're trying to explain, hey, this is not me with a life skills problem. This is me with a criminal in my life problem, right? So in short, when you're seeking legal intervention with an order, we have escalated. We are past the nice phase. You need to put some ice water in your veins. You're probably going to need some legal help. Don't let that stop you, but do try to seek it. And mostly what you need that help for is in making sure that your affidavit, your side of the story, meets the judge's criteria for an order, which means you need to approach it in kind of a deliberate, thoughtful way.
This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com. Yeah, so I want to just touch on a couple things about getting restraining orders, and as it relates to everything that Jim just said, which is all correct. And I just also come at this from the perspective of someone who has interacted with a lot of victims of domestic violence. And I've been the guy at 3 o'clock in the morning that says the courthouse opens at 9. You need to be there and get this thing done, like now. So what I don't want to do is put the bar too high. I don't want to make it sound more challenging, more difficult, more red tape than it is. Everything that Jim is talking about is certainly helpful and true, and they will definitely stack the odds in your favor. You know, if you're dealing with things like, if he gets a restraining order against you, does it mean you can't go to work? Like, if you guys work in the same building, for example, is that going to complicate your employment? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can come up in this, and I acknowledge that, right? But I also don't want to make this sound like, oh my God, I have to go hire an attorney just to get a, well, no, not necessarily. But what Jim is trying to illustrate with everything that he's saying here is, if, for example, you go get a restraining order against this guy, and that means he's not allowed to have any contact whatsoever with his kids, and he's maybe going to lose his job. Yeah, he's probably not going to go gently. And that's where you need to be prepared for all of this that Jim is saying, right? But if you're in this acute thing where, like, hey, this is getting sketch and I need to go put this guy on notice right now, then go ahead and do that. And that's okay, right? So just, try to check as many of these boxes as you can. If you have an attorney, if you're already working on a divorce or something and you can get their advice and have them help you, then great. All of those things are great. But if we're talking, again, this is in crisis and you need to go get help right now, I don't want you to...
Don't let this stop you.
Yeah, I don't want to put it on a pedestal, right? So just for example, I just went on the Googles and I searched, because I'm familiar with Arizona because that's where I work. I searched Arizona order of protection, and instead of restraining orders, they're called orders of protection here. And if it's not a domestic violence relationship, it's called an injunction against harassment, which is a little bit different, but they're the same thing. And if you Google Arizona restraining orders, you'll get a whole Arizona Supreme Court list of self-help, a guide on how to fill the form out, what you should put in the form, what do you need to know if you're the plaintiff, what do you need to know if you're the defendant, and there's all kinds of links there that you can follow, and I'm sure whatever state or jurisdiction that you're in will have something similar if you start searching for this. These are built to be, especially when it comes to domestic violence related stuff, these are built to be accessible without hiring an attorney, right? So just understand that we're talking best case scenarios, right? But we also don't want you to compromise the next most appropriate step if that's what you need to take. So just find that balance.
And it's contextual, right? Understand the context that Mike is coming from on this, which is he's the guy actually showing up at 3 a.m. and lady has a black eye and the guy put a dead cat in her mailbox again. And Mike is like, hey, go get a restraining order. And she's like, I don't know. It's scary. It's weird. I don't want to do it. Right. So he has that experience. My experience is different. It's not wrong. Neither is his. but it's a good example of this nuance thing, right? My experience was as a sexual assault counselor in college, dealing with college people and their weird relationshipy things in the dorms, and understanding that sometimes they were really squishy, and well, the guy was getting creepier and creepier, and it was growing over the course of weeks and months before we got to the dead cats and black eyes in most cases, right? So it's a context thing. The weirder the situation, the more complicated it is, the stronger the incentive the other guy has to fight, the more you're going to want to stack the odds, right?
Because these things do potentially have consequences. If this is just an X and he's got your life, or he's got his life, you got your life, and it's just, hey, just leave me alone, dude, then the bar is pretty low. But again, if this is going to kick him out of his house, because that's what happens, right? If a married couple, if a married person goes down to the courthouse and gets a restraining order against their spouse has to pack their shit and leave until they fight. You know, I mean, they can fight it, but that's where, like, okay, well, if I'm going to lose of course I'm going to fight that, right? Or again, I'm going to lose my kids or lose my job. I mean, so they have consequences, and that's where all of the stuff that Jim is saying really comes into play. So for sure.
So I wanted to hit the restraining order stuff early and hard because I think it's a big deal, and I think we throw around the word restraining order without understanding what we're saying, right? And that is something I want to make very, very clear in this whole process is, yes, it's important. Yes, you should get one if you're in a stalking situation. You want to be thoughtful about how you do it when you can be. You want to stack the odds when you can. Before you get to that, though, if someone is making you uncomfortable, is creeping you out, is making you feel threatened, is making you feel controlled, at that stage, whenever you recognize that, and it might take a while to recognize that. Again, humans and relationships are squishy. At the point of recognition, I want you to set, communicate, and enforce a boundary. You say, that's enough, we're done, right? And you have to use very clear words. Our relationship is over. I do not want to see or hear from you again. Do not contact me, right? And there might be a clearer way than that, but that's the clearest way I can think of. And you need to block contact on all channels. All channels. Don't remain friends on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat or anything like that, right? Block contact. Block the contacts, okay? Phone, social media, everything. Don't engage once the boundary is set. Once you've said we are done, we are done. Further engagement, one, is only going to put you at more risk, and two, is going to look to investigators like one more screwed up relationship. And at this point, when we get to the point where we're using the word stalker, we're not in a relationship anymore.
Yeah.
There's a little Dr. Phil for you.
Yeah. Not a doctor, however. Yeah. So this is important because I said earlier, this is about being assertive. And if you're soft on what's not okay or what is okay, it can look like weakness to the other person. And this is largely, it becomes a power control thing a little bit, right? So as you start to realize that you need to set these boundaries, you need to be assertive and clear about that. And that's really important. And one of the most common issues we see in situations like this is when you have this relationship that's sort of on and then off. It's back and forth. You break up, you get back together, break up, get back together. And maybe in one of those breakups, you set these boundaries, or maybe even went and got a restraining order, and then you kiss and make up and things are okay again. And then you get back together and that order is still in place. Now, I can tell you that the order is still enforceable at 3:00 in the morning, but how that's going to play out in court is going to look a lot different, right? And that's where you start to undermine the order itself, and that becomes problematic. And the bigger issue is you're reinforcing the exact behavior that you're trying to deter, prevent, and avoid. So this person comes and bothers you, comes and bothers you, comes and bothers you, comes and bothers you. You give in. Hey, it worked. I'm going to do it again. Right? Don't do that. So don't reinforce the negative thing that they're doing that you're trying to stop. So have that boundary, set it, communicate it, enforce it. Whether that's with a restraining order or just being assertive is up to you and the circumstances, but understand that assertiveness is really, and being resolute, right? Like you're assertive about that. And also you're going to stick to your guns. When he calls and texts you again at 3:00 in the morning when he's drunk, you don't, what do you want? Okay, fine. Like what? No, I told you you're not supposed to be calling me. I'm going to be reporting this to the police. You need to stop calling.
And block.
Right.
Block. Don't give them the in.
So all that being said, if you find yourself in one of these on, off, back and forth sort of relationships, which I get it. Like it happens, especially Jim talked about the lives being intertwined thing and all that. But if you're in a scenario where that has been a thing and you're trying to end it for good, start by building or reestablishing your close social circles away from that person. And this is something that it takes a lot of time and effort, but friends and family outside of that relationship, you need to talk about what's happening. You need to explain that you need help. You need to lean on those people, and you kind of have to claim yourself a little bit, claim your identity as someone without that other person. Because a lot of times in these relationships that are long-term and back and forth, and we've been together for so long and blah, 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 blah. It's like there's this codependency issue and there's this perceived security of the known. Like I'm comfortable. Like, yeah, he's kind of bad, but I know what kind of bad it is. And I think it's going to get better. Or it's just because it's what you're used to, whatever, and you don't know what else to do. Like you have to put yourself out there and get out of your comfort zone a little bit to get away from this person. And that means a little bit of vulnerability around people that maybe you're not that close to right now, or you haven't been for a long time. But as you reconnect with people outside of the pit, you'll be able to climb out of it, if that makes sense. So if you find yourself in that sort of situation and you're trying to set the boundary, but it's just hard to stick to it, that's my best advice is to put yourself out there and try to reestablish or build connections with people, farther and farther away, so that you have someone to help, lean down and give you a hand when you need to pull out. And you'll be surprised. A lot of times people will come through. You'll be surprised, but you got to put yourself out there.
I like that. One of the areas where this gets tricky is when the kid's involved, right? A custody agreement of some form. The best advice I've heard is to coordinate all communication, if you have to communicate, through a family custody app. That's a thing. Welcome to 2022. Yeah. There's one called Our Family Wizard. It's I guess one of the more common ones. The idea here is that the court can see it too, right? So when he messages or she messages something abusive or stalkery, they're doing it in a venue that the court is witnessing it.
Or if any communication occurs outside of that.
Yep.
Hey, this is how we communicate. Why are you calling me?
Yep.
It can be assumed to be nefarious, right? Like it's just assumed malicious at that point.
And that's the thing when Mike and I talk about this quite a bit is we like putting the other party in a situation where they have to put their cards on the table, where they have to make their intentions known, right? And this is one of those places. When the stalker does communicate, and again, we're trying to block all methods of communication. We don't want to talk to a stalker, right? Consider your options. You can not respond at all, which I think is a good thing. You could respond well in this positive, assertive, no, that's not how we're talking. I told you not to contact me. This is over. I'm calling the police, right? Or you can respond in a way that gives him more attention and more leverage on you. Don't do that, right? So you get to the point where you're like, I have got to get away from this cat. How do we make you hard to find? Well, it's It's the 21st century. People are actually pretty easy to find. You can assume he has Google. You can assume he has Facebook. You can assume he has friends who will Google and Facebook search for him, right? Or her. So it can be a real challenge, and it can be a real challenge to scrub online sources. Like if you move, often your deed or your mortgage is recorded and publicized. So how do you get your name off that stuff? Well, if push comes to shove, you can call whoever's running that website or email whoever's running that website and say plainly, hey, I'm a victim of stalking. I need your help. Can you please help me? And often they will come through for you. You might need to move. You might need to move jobs. And that sucks. Moving sucks. I've done a lot of it under good circumstances. I've done a lot of it. It extra sucks when you're trying to hide from someone. Changing jobs is the same way. And you shouldn't have to, right? The stalker should be the one who has to deal with this. But if it's between surviving or staying put,
or your
you
sanity,
need to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And keep your sanity in the process. I like that. Scrubbing the cyberspace is a ongoing thing. One of the things that you can do is just get your face off of Facebook and off of Instagram. Do a review of your privacy settings. Lock it down. If you need to, delete your accounts. I'm halfway tempted to delete my accounts any day anyway. So maybe take this as your impetus. When your lives are intertwined, you're often going to have mutual friends and acquaintances, right? You might need to space yourself away from them. You might need to communicate to the mutual friends, hey, I've got a problem with that guy or that girl. Please don't tell them anything about what we talk about. Please, keep my stuff on my side of the relationship. Keep his stuff on his side.
And that's a big deal when it comes to accountability. Let's say you go get the restraining order. And I mentioned if you were having trouble getting distance from this person, how you might have to just put yourself out there and be vulnerable and tell people that you're trying to reestablish connections away from the relationship and just be honest about that. That also means potentially telling the people at your job, telling people whatever, like, hey, like I'm having some issues with my ex. He's not supposed to come around. If he is, please let me know. It would help if you can get photos. There might be a reason why you involve those people, maybe they have a friend or a relative that you're also close to, and you could be like, hey, so-and-so and I are done. And, nothing personal, nothing against you, but I need, for everyone's good, I need you to make sure that he understands that he's not to contact me, and that there's going to be consequences if he does. And, there's some accountability can go a long way a lot of times in those relationships. Not in every case, but it's something to explore. The other thing to consider when you think about this run and hide feeling that might be natural for some people in this, I've got this stalker, so I've got to run away. In some circumstances, that might not be the case, right? You might not need to hide. Maybe you just need to change your posture a little bit. What does that look like? Act like someone who will take the appropriate steps to hold the person accountable, right? This is that assertiveness that we were talking about. I don't want to say like, don't act like a victim, because it doesn't mean that you're not a victim, but understand that if you carry yourself as someone who is going to take action, right, that can go a long way. And part of that might mean actually physically being prepared to defend yourself, right? We talked about like, oh, just go get a gun. That's not great advice. Well, no, but it could be. It could be a layer here to add into that, right? And to give you the confidence to be able to draw those lines more clearly. And
pepper spray has a way of setting and communicating a boundary.
Yeah.
that words don't.
But if you're clear and assertive about your boundaries and your expectations and what you're going to do if they're not abided by, if you're intentional about where you go, who you're with, how you approach home security, all of those things, just be a hard target. Don't be caught out in a dark parking lot by yourself at night. Don't go wandering down the street, on your morning run at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning when it's dark out and he knows your routine. Change up your routine, whatever, if that's necessary.
And to be clear here, we're not saying that any of this is good, right?
Sure.
You shouldn't have to live in fear. You shouldn't have to worry about running when it's dark out. Everyone should be able to run when it's dark out. Understand that what we're telling you is if you know that there's a threat to you, do the things that you can do to make yourself difficult to target.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Is change the posture. Make yourself a hard target. Be hard to fuck with, right? And I'm not saying that it's just that simple. But what I am saying is this is a power and control thing a little bit, and don't give them that much power over you. And that's a big part of it. And I'm not saying take your safety and security lightly. That's not what I'm saying at all. You definitely should take the appropriate measures to layer this. This is just one piece of it. But your own mentality can't be that you have to live in this way like Jim is saying. It's just saying that there's more to it, and you're trying to adjust the other person's dynamic. There's only certain things you can do to control it, but you have some ownership in this too. And I want anyone who might be maybe a victim of this to feel sort of empowered by their ability to have a say, right? Not only in their survival, but also in how they're going to hold this person accountable.
I like that. And it is tough, right? We don't want to victim blame or victim shame. We do need to understand that, again, in this world, you shouldn't have to be worried. No woman, no person should have to feel like they have to walk around with their keys in their fingers like Wolverine. First off, that's a terrible tactic. And second, you shouldn't have to, right? But when the situation dictates it, when you know that there's a threat, you have to manage your risk, right? If you know that there's a hazard, do something about the hazard. And there's a lot you can do to kind of set yourself up to do this well, right? I said, don't get a gun without training. I firmly believe in that. That said, do some training. There are a lot of different ways you can do that. I think starting with a jiu-jitsu class is a good way to start.
Hell yeah.
And it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. If that's too hard, or whatever, if it's not available where you are, Krav Maga isn't bad. Taekwondo isn't bad. Karate, I don't care what it is. I care that you get into a class and start learning some things. And
but
part
jiu-jitsu.
of it is yeah, we like jiu-jitsu, to be clear. But any of those, frankly, changes how you walk and talk. It just does. Right?
That's a big part of it, I think.
No, we are big on jiu-jitsu for a reason. But do a class. Start there. Get pepper spray. Pepper spray is one layer. It's not gonna solve all your problems, but it does have a way of communicating a boundary that words don't. Okay? But don't just buy a can of pepper spray and stick it on your nightstand. It doesn't work that way. And please God, don't use wasp spray on anything but wasps. Don't use bear spray on anything but bears. You're looking for human spray for humans. And you need it with you physically, like in a place you can grab it, like on a waistband, right? And if you're comfortable doing the gun thing, I'm all for it. I'm a gun guy. This is our thing, is tactical stuff. Do take a class. Start with an introduction. If you've never touched a gun before, take an introduction to shooting class. I recommend like one-on-one training, right? Once you've gotten past that, take a defensive handgun or concealed carry class and keep taking classes from there, right? Because you're trying to build up your proficiency and you're trying to do it quickly because we don't know, right? We don't know the timeline the bad guy's on. And while you're doing all of those things, work your other layers, work your cybersecurity layer, work your home security layer, work your legal security layer with this restraining order. Start building up your friend network and your support network of people you can reach out to if things get weird. People who are going to look out for you. People are going to tip you off, like neighbors, if they notice a car driving by or parking across the street from you, right? You're trying to build up your layers of security here. So what's next? Well, this is another area where this kind of gets fuzzy. What happens when the dude walks through the restraining order? Well, the first thing I want you to do is call 911 right then.
Well, if it's safe, because 911 is still, how's it go? That when the cops are minutes away, when seconds count, the cops are minutes away, right? So
yeah.
Take the appropriate immediate actions, like if you're able to lock the door, if you're able to lock yourself in a room, if you're able to arm yourself, if that's appropriate and you're capable of it, all of those things. And then as soon as practical, send out the help signal for sure.
Yeah, so this is contextual, right? If you got the time, take the time. Call 911. But yeah, we have some immediate things we want you to do. And the rest is, well, tactical. That's the whole point of this show, right? Is listen to what we have to tell you about how to win a fight.
Which is exactly where I was going with that is like, yeah, the phone call is important, but there's some, you want to make sure you're making that phone call from a position of advantage if you can, right? And I think that kind of brings me to my final point on this, which is this is one, cog on the wheel of survival and safety and security, right? All of your home security, home defense stuff, which we've done a whole episode on, all the self-defense stuff, which we touch a little bit on that here. Good risk management, good decisions. Don't go to the party and drink too much and he's going to be there. Those sorts of things that are going to put you in a bad spot, you need to be conscious and aware of. If you do have a serious stalking problem and you know that he's following you around, like maybe that run in the dark by yourself, you need to reconsider that. And I don't want you to have to live that way, but in a tactical sense, in the acute phase of this, where this is active, maybe you need to reevaluate some of those practices and just say, hey, like this isn't going to be a permanent thing, but for right now, maybe I should either take a friend or run on the phone with somebody, like at least, or go during the day or whatever. So, but make good risk management decisions while you're dealing with this, right? And keep listening to the show and all the things that we talk about as it relates to this stuff, because it all ties in somehow.
I like that.
That's all I got.
Big picture, stalking comes in all the different forms. Recognizing that you're in a situation that you can now officially declare, hey, this is bad. This is a criminal stalking kind of thing. That early recognition, I think, will help you. And once you have made that call, and it's a judgment call, and it's your judgment call to make, you're in charge, take the steps that are appropriate to that. One is set a boundary and then enforce it. Break it off, break the relationship, right? Communicate that boundary. If that's not working, get the authorities involved. Start that legal process. When you can stack the deck, do stack the deck, right? You might need to take some steps to make yourself hard to find. You might need to vary your routes and times. You might need to up your personal security posture. And that's all the things. That is how you go running, how you go out, taking some self-defense courses, working your way through the different types of self-defense courses and figuring out what's going to work for you. Be prepared to call 911. If you don't have the time to call 911, repel borders. Get in there and fight, right? Save your own life. I think that stalking has affected an awful lot of people I know one way or another. I think that often it's kind of this slow, creepy, slow burn kind of scenario until it's not. And because of that, because of the way these things tend to progress, recognizing it and snapping that chalk line and saying, nope, this has gone past my boundaries. I need to do something, I think is really important for you. I think that is more important than, well, just get you a shotgun or a restraining order. Yes, I like shotguns and I like restraining orders, but there's more to it than that. And this is your chance, as you're listening to a podcast like this, is think about how you would handle it and how you should handle it if this affects you directly. And think about what advice you're going to give a friend, a coworker, a sibling who is dealing with this. And make sure the advice you give is part of the solution, not part of the problem. And if it's, I'm going to go kick his ass for you, that sounds good, but then that gets you back into that legal process, usually on the receiving end of it, right? So think about that. I think that's all I got. Be safe out there. Be smart out there. Mike, what you got?
That's it. I think we covered it.
Cool.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire of constantly having to rack your slide to reset the trigger. With Dry Fire Mag, all you do is clear your weapon, load this training mag up, and work on your trigger work. Check them out on dryfiremag.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.